Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of Truffle Talks. I'm James Stephen, the editor of Truffle Report, and Truffle Talks is our new interview series where we sit down with the movers and shakers defining psychedelic business, policy reform, science, and culture. Joining us today are Chris Dawson and Andrew Galloway of Dimensions Healing, and we're going to talk about just how they're going to pull off opening a psychedelic retreat here in Ontario in 2022. But first, I'll let them introduce themselves and Dimensions. Chris, take it away.
Thanks, James. Really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us. My name's Chris Dawson. I'm the CEO of Dimensions. I am a businessman by training, not clinical, but I've spent about 15 years in the treatment business, having run the Edgewood Health Network, founding the Edgewood Health Network and running it for a number of years. And it was part of my realization that traditional forms of healing weren't working any longer that led me down the path that eventually meant the starting of Dimensions. So pleased to be here and to be able to talk to you more about it.
All right, thank you. And Andrew?
My name is Andrew Galloway. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Dimensions. I've been the last 20 years in clinical practice, specifically in the treatment of addictions. And it's been a great journey taking Dimensions to this place so far.
All right. So we're going to get deeper into Dimensions in just a second. But before we do, I would just like to say one thing to our audience. When the Amazon series 9 Perfect Strangers came out, every other psychedelics publication out there did some 9 Perfect Strangers content. Oh, this isn't really what psychedelic healing is like. It's not. We didn't do that at Truffle Report. So for all of you, this counts as my obligatory 9 Perfect Strangers content. We're talking about psychedelic healing centers, what they should and shouldn't do. That's it. All right. So with that in mind, tell us about the upcoming center here in Ontario and the sister location in Costa Rica.
Well, I'm going to start off, James, by saying that Andrew and I actually did an interview yesterday with somebody in Chicago who was asking us about 9 Perfect Strangers.
Okay.
Fortunately, the majority of the conversation quickly moved back to Dimensions and what we were doing, because right. While I did enjoy that show for all of the same reasons other people did, it was mainly because it was such a ridiculous, over-the-top depiction of what a psychedelic retreat would be.
And that's why I have not yet tried to shove that down anyone's throat on our platform.
Fair enough. There is one thing that our retreat in Algonquin Highlands or in Costa Rica will have in common with that television program, and that is that it's in a beautiful setting. I think that's probably where the similarities begin and end.
Yeah.
So we are in construction and renovation of a 40-acre property in Algonquin Highlands. Algonquin Highlands is an interesting little community. It's nestled between Muskoka and Haliburton, and it's a beautiful setting. We have 40 acres, which I think I mentioned. What we're designing is a retreat center that is firmly established in nature, that is sort of 5-star in its approach to the hospitality aspects of staying at a retreat, but is a therapeutically robust, programmatically driven approach to psychedelic healing. That's kind of the top line that I would give to anybody who wanted to know more about what we were doing.
Right. Okay. So Andrew, why don't you tell me a little bit about the actual experiences themselves? We're talking, about psilocybin use under Section 56 exemptions, but also about psychedelic inspired experiences.
Sure. Yeah. So with psilocybin, as you know, you get a Schedule 56 exemption in Canada, and we're hoping that'll transition over to special access or something similar in the near future. But if you were to come to Dimensions for a week retreat, it would start, in my view, ceremony starts with the first conversation, actually. So prior to even arrival, you'll go through a full assessment process. Once deemed eligible for our program, you'll start with individual and group therapy. We really believe that community is important, coming together. So we want that actually to start before everybody arrives. If you show up, you don't know anybody, it takes a day or two to get comfortable. We want people to arrive feeling comfortable. That we want them to have that feeling of safety and trust. So if they're trusting the person beside them already upon arrival, that group has already done its work. But once you get there, there's walkways, organic gardens, scent gardens, but then a whole bunch of different modalities to choose from to help prepare you for ceremony. So we'll be offering things like float tanks, breath work, yoga, light therapy, sound therapy, Qigong. There's probably 5 more that I haven't mentioned, but that'll allow each individual client or guest to choose what they'd like to do to prepare for ceremony. And you'll do that with your therapist, sort of deciding what's best for you and what is needed for you. And then on the second night, you'll do your first ceremony, and that will be with a plant elder, we call them, or a medicine server. And I like to call that sort of the John Cougar Mellencamp dose. It won't be a hero dose. It'll be sort of what you might have done in university back in the day. And that's sort of just to see, gauge how people react, how they respond to it. If you're an experienced user, then you'd probably get more, and that'll be determined between you and your clinician. But you'll do a ceremony that'll involve, song, music, drumming, chanting, all led by the plant elder. But there'll actually be psychotherapists also in ceremony. They won't be participating with psilocybin, but they'll be there sitting with you to make sure you're okay. And if you ask for help, they're there to help you and digest whatever you're going through. We'll do a second ceremony a couple of days later, and that'll be a higher dose. And in the meantime, too, you'll do another, registered massage therapy or light therapy or something along those lines. And then we get into the integration phase. How do we take what we experienced, what we learned in that ceremony, and apply it to our everyday lives to change our behaviors, to make the changes we want to make? So that doesn't happen in 2 days. No. Integration takes time.
And I would just like to say that is the, for all those interested in psychedelic therapy out there, that is the very, very important part, is the integration. The actual experience itself is fantastic, but like, other medicines, other therapies, unless you can actually really make it a part of your life effectively, the lessons you've learned, the benefit fades over time.
Yeah, without question. So we developed quite a extensive continuing care or aftercare program where people can participate in groups of individual therapy, and our hope that those groups may even stay connected and come back again for another retreat down the road.
Okay, and just a bit about the differences between Ontario and Costa Rica. Costa Rica, obviously, you can do a little more. You can have a bit more of an involved psilocybin experience there right now.
Well, strictly speaking, right now, Costa Rica is not fundamentally different than Canada, to be honest, except that there is nothing in Costa Rica that's the equivalent of the Controlled Substances Act, which is where plant medicine generally and psilocybin would reside today. So in the case of Costa Rica, there's nothing specifically outlawing psilocybin. On the other hand, it's not also legal, if you know what I mean. So there are many retreat centers down in Costa Rica that are operating sort of in this gray area. And those are the ones that, if people have had an experience up until now, it could be that sort of experience. In Costa Rica, we are going to be working with the government to be awarded an alternative health permit. And that's actually a blessing to allow you to legally use psilocybin. And that the requirements for that are kind of detailed and a bit boring, but suffice it to say that there's sort of 50% clinical and then 50% health and safety. And so it gives, there's maybe only 1 or 2 other centers in Costa Rica today that have an alternative health permit.
Right, that are actually doing this the proper way and not just exploiting that gray area?
That's right, that's right. And in fact, those are organizations that we are already teaming up with to try and differentiate ourselves from the gray area players, if you will. And so because the importance of integration, as Andrew touched on and you pointed out as well, James, is critically important. But equally important is kind of the core health and safety around this, which, we've spoken to people who said, hey, it's good that you guys are coming from Canada because we kind of trust you that you're going to be concerned about health and safety. I've never thought about it that way, but we are. But also our program is robust. They're therapeutically robust. So we're approaching this less, one way of contrasting it is a lot of these centers are led by a charismatic healer. We're sort of taking the opposite approach. Not that our psychotherapists don't have charisma and can't engage with our guests, but the program is going to dictate how people move through it.
Right. And the therapy is not about the personality of the therapist.
Precisely right. And while we
which is a danger in any kind of therapy.
Precisely.
It develops unhealthy attachments. It promotes dependency. It's just, generally a thing that the industry recognizes can be a problem.
Yeah, and Andrew's got a team of researchers, practitioners, academics who are developing our program, and these are the things they're preoccupied with. Because this, not just because there's this gray area that people operate in, but because they do gray things inside that gray area. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to very intentionally take a different approach to it. And fundamental is that while we honor the traditional healing methods, Andrew mentioned ceremony, we consider that to be an essential part of a retreat. But we're marrying it with the latest neuroscience and neurobiology to really come up with something that is robust from both a scientific perspective, but also from the consciousness side, which is where the traditional healing comes from.
All right. So I guess with all that in mind, 2 questions, and you can take them, both of them to both of you or one at a time. How do the practices you're starting with scale into other substances and practices as the laws progress? Because right now we do have Section 56 exemptions. I think there are something like 39 granted in Canada so far for mostly terminal palliative cancer patients, but a few others for things like depression and PTSD. We reasonably expect that to move to the special access program at some point and beyond there. How does that translate to your business model?
Well, maybe I'll start with just the legal side, and then Andrew can sort of explain more on the clinical side and about some of the different plant medicines. So, first of all, whether it's Costa Rica, whether it's Canada, or whether it's any other place that we choose to operate, we're only ever going to operate within the bounds of the law in that jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So, we are setting ourselves up in Ontario, anticipating that psilocybin is going to be at least decriminalized in the near future. I actually think it's the beginning, and maybe cannabis was really the beginning, but it's the beginning of a process where plant medicine will gain a broader level of acceptance. So we're setting ourselves up to be able to introduce not just psilocybin, but things like ayahuasca down the road. We're not able to predict exactly when those things are going to happen, but we're encouraged by the signs that we see, and we're encouraged, and we've kind of invested in our ability to take advantage of those things as the laws permit. Because and in Costa Rica, the things are a little more wide open, but again, with that alternative health permit, you still need to go through a process, whether it's psilocybin or whether it's different plant medicines. Mm-hmm. While we wait for that, in Ontario, we have a plan, which I'll let Andrew discuss, that allows us to kind of bridge from now until some of the broader array of plant medicines emerge. Andrew?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you know, cannabis by definition is hallucinogenic. So, we've developed specific programs using cannabis. We call it conscious cannabis ceremony or use. And cannabis can create altered perceptions of thoughts and feeling as well, and produce, a spiritual or psychedelic experience. And so if we need to, and if for some reason we're not able to get Schedule 56 or special access, we've got a program that people can still come to, still experience a psychedelic experience, but using cannabis instead. And it's quite amazing. I've done several ceremonies now, how effective it actually is. I kind of went in with a thought of this will not be anything like psilocybin or ayahuasca, and had a pretty profound and deep experience the two or three times that I did it, which is great because it allows us to give people who are also maybe not ready to do psilocybin or ayahuasca an opportunity to use what we may consider something a little softer. Mm-hmm.
All right. And so just circling back to the health and safety thing, let's just talk a little bit about your practitioners, their qualifications, because I'm sure you guys are aware that there are issues of accountability in the space. We have seen a lot of really very unfortunate stories about things like abuse and sexual assault. Maybe nothing in real life on that 9 Perfect Strangers level, not to make light of what is actually happening, but there are some definite issues of safety and responsibility and accountability there. So I'd like to hear a bit more about your practitioners and about your protocols for your guests.
Yeah, and from a safety point of view, everyone goes through, as I mentioned, a full assessment to make sure you're eligible to come to the retreat. So assuming that that's happened, all our therapists have been trained in psychedelic or cannabis use therapy, so they have that training. And another way, just to give more comfort to our guests, during ceremony, we will have cameras in the room. It will not be recorded voice or anything like that, but it'll give the feeling, in the sense, not only for our clients, but also for our practitioners, that everything is being recorded in case, when you're under the influence of a psychedelic, our thoughts can take us places of being confused, and the tape will show what really happened. So that'll give people a sense of safety. Other things that we're doing, all our therapists have outside supervision, not internal. Having internal supervision can be very dangerous, because you're friends with people, so if something does happen, it ends up getting stayed or locked into that little vault.
Yeah, some bias can creep in there.
Yes, exactly. So all our therapists are required to have an outside supervision. And then in terms of who we have there, our chief medical officer is Dr. DJ Cook. He's the chair and head of neurosurgery at Queen's University. So we have a neurologist, brain surgeon is our CMO. And then we also have as our head clinical director, Jesse Hansen. He's a neuropsychologist. We've got Carmen Littlejohn. She's got her master's degree in clinical and somatic psychology. We've got Donald Curry, who's a registered psychotherapist, specifically in somatic relations. Massage therapist, registered, whatever modality it is, they are registered in that discipline with the other not less important, but different modalities.
Yeah.
And I think even those complementary disciplines, James, all of the practitioners have psychedelic training. So even an RMT that's doing massage therapy for us has taken courses and worked with others in how to perform those kinds of therapies in the context of an overall psychedelic experience.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, we're actually hosting a workshop for all our practitioners and clinicians in December for some more in-depth training of how to bring out the best for a psychedelic experience in things like breath work and Qigong and acupuncture and stuff like that. So it's pretty thorough.
Cool. So with that in mind, tell me about the guests then. At various points in the history of Truffle Report, I've taken sort of deep dives into the existing psychedelic retreat space, and there's corporate retreats, there's personal wellness stuff. I saw a bachelorette party one in Amsterdam. I saw one, in the sort of rural Netherlands where they have sort of a Celtic stone circle, and it's very, primal ritualistic stuff. Who is your I guess target market? Who is your ideal guest? Who are you going?
I think, James, there's going to be 2 broad categories. Mm-hmm. The one category that I think I can tell you is not our target market is the bachelorette party group.
Yeah.
So the one thing we are not engaged
not to exclude anyone.
But... No, definitely not. And there may be a context within which those individuals might come and see us, but within a different.
If you had a traumatic bachelorette party and need the therapy and the integration to cope with that, then by all means come to Dimensions, and we will help you process.
I've had a few traumatic bachelor parties, so certainly, Yeah. But we're not here promoting, nor are we encouraging necessarily recreational use of psilocybin or other plant medicines. But we're also not dealing exclusively with those people who are diagnosable. Both Andrew and I come from the addiction and mental health world. So our origins in thinking about plant medicine were really to revolutionize treatment for people with mental health, substance abuse issues. So that's our starting point. And so things like substance abuse, things like trauma, generalized anxiety, depression, these are all issues that I think, put into that broad bucket of disorders or diagnosable conditions. These are all people that we think that we're going to have great success with. Since DJ Cook has joined the team, traumatic brain injury has probably been added to our added to that list simply because DJ is a neurosurgeon and is particularly skilled and has background in this area.
And it makes sense to pursue that.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that we're still working around how do we bring these groups together. Are these groups? Would you have a group for just those struggling with addiction, or would you have a group that is just those struggling with depression, for example? How do you blend those groups? We're still working through the different permutations and combinations that might make a therapeutic difference in people's experience. Then there's another broad group, and I actually think that as we've worked our way through this might actually represent more than 50% of the people that in the long run we serve, and that is those people that are in this for self-betterment purposes, if you will, or to raise their consciousness or to access their subconscious. And that can be anything from couples that want to sort of reinvigorate their relationship to individuals that maybe work in a profession where it's highly stressful and so on. One of our board members says, the perfect candidate for a retreat like this is the CEO who kind of gets his 360 review from his employees and finds out everybody thinks he's an asshole, So all sorts of individuals, I think, can benefit from the consciousness raising that we do. But then you also touched on corporate retreats, and we've already been contacted by corporations or quasi-corporations that are interested in bringing their management team to us, and sort of using plant medicine to enhance the connection perhaps that their team enjoys or lack of connection, but also perhaps to enhance creativity or other ways of thinking about their business. So all of these different groups are potential guests and clients of ours, some of them on the very therapeutic end of the spectrum, some less so. But I think that our program has been designed in a sufficiently robust way that we'll be able to kind of, twist and turn a little bit to create unique experiences for different groups of people.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up question to that is, for each of these sort of subsets, say the very therapeutic, the personal wellness seeker, and the, for lack of a better term, corporate retreat or team building retreat, do you have a rough idea of what these things are going to cost at this point?
Yeah, we do. We're still don't hold us to this because we're still finalizing that.
No, early days, but
yeah. But I think it would be safe to say that a week-long retreat in any of our locations, depending on the currency that you're talking about, is probably going to be around $10,000. Mm-hmm. And it's not cheap. There is no doubt that is not cheap. And we do get questions around accessibility. We're hoping that our success and the success of others means that this is an industry that grows and thrives and can then be produced in a way that is more accessible to other parts of the population. But to be frank about it, this is a situation where we're kind of making the rich pay. If you want to get this started, you've got to start it with people that are both inclined to want to explore and have the means to do so.
Fair enough. And just going back to that, the therapeutic aspect. So I know that you have a partnership. Obviously, you mentioned Dr. Cook. There's a research partnership with Queen's University, I understand. So how does
Andrew, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So I'm just interested in the research aspect, the not recreational, but the hospitality aspect. How do they interact? How is data collected? Things of that nature.
Yeah, so one of the things we recognized is that we wanted to make sure we did some research. And originally we looked at doing research in-house, but then, there's a bias always. So finding a partner or collaborating with Queen's University seemed like a logical choice for us. So we established the Dimensions Health Collaboration for the Study of Psychedelics at Queen's University, which is over 5 years. And that collaborative is really going to design some clinical trials, also assess our program when it's up and running, help us understand the policies and stuff that are coming out. So it's really a positive working relationship. And obviously having Dr. Cook as our chief medical officer and somebody at Queen's University, we have a fairly tight relationship. So I couldn't be more pleased with how that turned out for us and for Dimensions, because we know that Queen's University is one of the worldwide recognized universities, and anything that they put out, any data they share, is going to come with a stamp of approval and really help us out.
I think, James, to your question around how does research kind of play off hospitality, our view is that our approach to hospitality doesn't change depending on whether it's the guest segment or whether there's a research trial going on in a particular retreat. Obviously, anybody that comes to a retreat where we're suggesting that research takes place, we would have to get consent from all those individuals that are participating. I think it's going to be very important. One of the areas that I'm interested in is because we believe so deeply about the retreat experience and the traditional healing and ceremonial aspects of that experience. We're particularly interested in, is there a patient group who are sort of taking that pill that somebody else in the psychedelic space identifies, takes that in the morning with their glass of juice and gets on with their day? How do the results for that group compare with the results for people that come through our retreat center and the integration process that we put forward? So I'm hoping that that one of the things about this kind of research, as the researchers have explained it to us, is that it's not particularly intrusive. And we would be using technology to the extent that there is self-reporting involved. There's technology that will support us to do that. And so, I think there's probably more research that's going to take place on the therapeutic end of the scale, as we described a few minutes ago. But I don't think that means that we need to compromise any other aspects of what we're trying to deliver.
Mm-hmm. And with that, do you expect to see I guess I would say large blocks of, for lack of a better term, research subjects coming through to do the therapeutic end of things through other private psychedelic drug developers? Is that something you're looking into?
Not specifically yet. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. What I do think is that the medical community will be a source of individuals that might be particularly good candidates for research. Yes. So, for example, DJ, if he's doing some traumatic brain injury work at our retreat center, clearly that's something that he's going to want to do the research on and take a very clinical approach to. Whether they come from the private sector in the way that you described, James, I'm not too sure. But certainly we're expecting the medical community to be recommending people.
Well, I just imagined, with the $10,000 price tag, which, as you admitted, is not cheap, that there could be, blocks of patients coming from different places. And that is one way that people could access this. I'm also assuming you don't offer discounts to the editors of psychedelics publications. Just wanted to throw that one out there.
Well, that's better left for outside of the podcast, James.
Okay.
but we are going to be having scholarships for those that can't afford it, and specifically more for Indigenous and people of color to be able to come to the facility as well. So
okay. All right, so I guess just as we start to wrap things up, I just want to talk a little bit about establishing the actual center, where you're at in the construction of everything, setting up the business, the people you're training, and I just think it's a really cool time to be alive. It's a cool project to be involved in, and I'm glad I'm in this space. So anything fun and unexpected you'd like our viewers to know about the business of setting up psychedelic retreats?
Well, I can tell you one thing that I would not have predicted, but that has been a very pleasant thing for us to come to realize. We've got about a dozen employees at this point, James, but we've probably got 2 or 3 times that involved in working with us in one way or the other. So a lot of the research folks that are working on the program development with Andrew are not employees, but contract people. But we're doing some of the mundane things that every kind of company has to do, like develop your website and get your public relations in place, et cetera, et cetera. And a number of these outside providers, as they've worked with us, have said, you're our favorite client. And it's very flattering. And I'd like to think it's because Andrew and I are particularly charming, but I think that they see that there's a purpose to what we're doing. And it doesn't mean that they are necessarily driven to enjoy a psilocybin experience themselves, but they see that what we're doing is something with intention, and we're trying to change our little corner of the world.
There is a genuine recognition of the value to this from everybody. Yeah.
And so people really, and it's really interesting. We have a web organization, web developer that's been working with us, and one of their team, actually, the person who's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, is in Ukraine, and she actually in a internal meeting with her own organization, she stopped the meeting once and said, "Yeah, I just need to tell everybody about what I'm working on. This is the most inspirational thing I've ever been a part of," and they shared that story with us, and it was really quite thrilling. And so Andrew and I have the excitement that comes with doing this, but I didn't expect that all these people that work with us would find it equally exciting. And so I'm really pleased about that. And remember, so we finished our first fundraising on, February 27th, and we bought the Algonquin property on February 28th. So we were up and running very, very quickly.
You move fast.
Yeah, and we've been sprinting pretty much ever since. There are a lot of things, though, that you need to set up when you're setting up a new company that are pretty mundane and not particularly sexy. Like if you don't have a payroll system, people might like what you're doing, but they do kind of like to get paid. Yeah. So, there's the non-sexy parts of it for sure, but people are really enthusiastic about where we're going, and we're flattered by it every day.
I mean, that's something I've bumped into a lot in the wider space. Whether or not people have a familiarity with psychedelics and knowledge of psychedelics, right now, I would say there is a genuine hunger for hope and healing in whatever form we can offer it to people.
Yeah, a number of people have said, did you somehow plan COVID and that you would kind of show up right around the end of COVID and so on? And it's like, well, if we had that kind of ability, we'd be doing something different. But yeah. But I do think that it is interesting how our timing has coincided with almost a global sort of period of reflection around whether it's the way we work, the way we interact with one another, the way we treat one another. All of these things are subjects that have been part of the psychedelic discussion for years, that are now sort of spilling out into the broader community. So we're just happy to be part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't be more excited about what we're doing, and when I think about what my own personal journey is why I got involved in this. I'm a recovering addict. I got sober 20 years ago from crack cocaine addiction. I spent my first 10 years doing the typical 12-step group therapy, individual therapy, and had a great life. 2 kids, doing the television show Intervention on A&E, working for the National Hockey League and the Substance Abuse Program. Like everything outside was so great, but yet I still had this underlying trauma that I carried. And I started doing plant medicines about 10 years ago. And that was the shift for me. I healed. And, having gone through that experience, in the last few years, suddenly realizing, this is something I'd really like to try and bring to others. Fortunately, I can afford to hop on planes and go to, Ecuador or Peru and stuff like that, but many can't. And I really wanted to bring this to Canada, for other people to have the opportunity to heal the way I did. So the fact that we're having so much success and things are going so smoothly just couldn't make me happier, and just renews my passion for this project.
All right. Well, I mean, that's all I had, and I think that's a great place to leave it. Unless you guys want to say something else, I'll offer you the last word.
Well, I think, James, one of the things that has been evolving in the 7 or 8 months that the organization's been around is our connection to the broader psychedelic community. That includes yourself in the Truffle report, but our word is spreading, and we're participating in the spreading of that word. And so we're honored that you wanted to include us in this new communication channel that you're launching, and thanks for asking us to be part of it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
All
Very
right.
much appreciate it.
Then I think we will leave it there. Once again, this has been Christopher Dawson and Andrew Galloway of Dimensions Healing. I'm James Stephen, the editor of Truffle Report. You've been watching Truffle Talks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Truffle Talks. You can find us online at truffle.report or as Truffle Report on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and Truffle_report on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. See you next week.